From the Daily Reporter, this is Ethan Duran. Welcome to Brews and Blueprints, a podcast about construction and development across Wisconsin. I'm Ethan Duran with the Daily Reporter, and this is the Brews and Blueprints podcast. I'm here with Pam Fendt, president of the Milwaukee Area Labor Council. Fendt was part of the Great Lakes Region Organizing Committee of the Laborers International Union of North America from 2010 until her semi-retirement last year. Good morning, Pam. It's good to have you on.
Good morning, Ethan. I'm very happy to be here.
That's great. I think the last time we talked was at our Women in Construction event, where you became the Lifetime Achievement Award winner. Congratulations on that.
Thank you very much. That was a big honor, and I really like the way the Daily Reporter has been doing an annual event that holds up the progress for women in the construction industry.
Of course. I don't remember. I think we talked briefly at that event, and were you at Labor Fest this Labor Day as well when Minnesota Governor Tim Walz was in town to talk?
Yes, as a matter of fact, the Milwaukee Area Labor Council is the organization that organizes the large Labor Fest celebration annually, and we were very pleased to host Governor Walz to speak with our crowd.
Did you get to see him? What was that like?
Yes, he has very many complimentary words for organized labor, and he's considered a strong ally of unions in his home state of Minnesota.
Tell me a little more about the Milwaukee Area Labor Council. How long have you been around? What's the first thing to know?
Well, coincidentally, this month we are going to be celebrating our 65th anniversary in the format of the organization that we are now. The Milwaukee Area Labor Council is actually a 3-county council. It's Ozaukee, Washington, and Milwaukee counties. This grew from being the Milwaukee County Labor Council in its first form. But yes, 65th anniversary of our AFL-CIO chartered organization this coming Saturday.
What are some of Malk's, do you call it Malk for short? What are some of their goals out there in the construction field specifically?
Well, the overall goal of a labor council is to bring together the different unions that are active in the area. So we have approximately 90 different active unions and councils representing a wide range of industries and workers. But the construction trades are an especially strong anchor part of our council in the Milwaukee area.
You were also involved in the laborers, as I mentioned. How did you find yourself entering the construction field? Was that something you were originally interested early on, or was it something your career kind of took you to?
Yeah, it's definitely a turn in my career path that I never really envisioned. I was interested in public policy. My master's degree is from UW-Milwaukee, and it's in urban studies. And I worked for 10 years at the Center for Economic Development at UW-Milwaukee. And one of my community projects, we did support and research for different community-based organizations. And in 2003, so 21 years ago, an organization formed called the Coalition for Good Jobs and Livable Neighborhoods. And I was working with that coalition in my role at UWM, and they were researching how could they make investments in downtown redevelopment more impactful for the broadest definition of community in the Milwaukee area. So while we might see TIF investments creating a bigger tax base for the city, what does it mean in terms of jobs and economic prosperity for regular everyday citizens? So my entrance into the construction industry was through this public policy lens and looking at the job creation effects of different investments in economic development. And then how could we tie that to job career opportunities for Milwaukee residents? So our coalition ended up working on the residence preference program changes that happened in 2009, where the number went from 25% underemployed resident participation to 40%. And what's interesting is that was completely backed by the building trades. Those efforts started under former Milwaukee Building and Construction Trades Council, Lyle Balistreri, and continued with the current president of the council, Dan Bukewicz. And those, organized labor's been looking at ways to create a better pipeline for new entrants into the construction industry. So I started working on an effort that was really public policy based or research based, and got so interested in this work to help people get a foothold in construction that I eventually ended up leaving my job at the think tank to work full time on these issues.
And then what was it like being taking that next step in the next organization? What are some of the highlights of that part of your career?
So between working at UW Milwaukee and working for the laborers union, I worked for this nonprofit called Good Jobs in Livable Neighborhoods. And unfortunately, it was when we had the Great Recession. So some nonprofit funding dried up, and we were only really active for a short period of time. But in that time, we had a great impact in creating the Park East Redevelopment Compact, which applied public policy standards to the county's land that was developed in the Park East once the freeway corridor was torn down, and then through the Milwaukee Organizing to Restore Employment project, the MORE Ordinance, and that was changing TIF policy in the city of Milwaukee. So two great big wins for the coalition in the time frame that it existed. So while I was working with Good Jobs in Livable Neighborhoods, President Obama, and the effort was spearheaded by then Vice President Joe Biden, issued their economic program to try to stimulate the economy with different federal investments. So similar to what's going on now with the bipartisan infrastructure deal that President Biden spearheaded, back then the Obama plan was really doing some investments in renewable energy. And so the laborers union was interested in trying to see if, as we worked on expanding those careers, we could make them good paying union careers. And so I started working on that with them in 2010.
That's interesting. I feel like here at the Daily Reporter, we the infrastructure angle, we talk a little bit about that. I think every week we have a news story out about a new sum coming out in Wisconsin, or at least in the Milwaukee area. I think the last one was Milwaukee County allocating more than $20 million in funding for road projects. Is that something you still work with? And what are your opinions on this new influx of federal money coming in to boost local infrastructure and energy projects?
Well, I think Joe Biden remembered that there was some criticism from progressive economists on the Obama stimulus plan, that it did not invest enough money to really move the needle on the unemployment issues that cities across the nation were facing. And so I think Joe Biden remembered that advice, that we needed to go big in order to, fix our crumbling infrastructure. We lag behind a lot of industrialized countries in our rail transportation, good public transportation, and to have year after year grades of C or D or C plus at the best for our bridges and our water plants and things like that. That's not a good situation to be in. So if we're going to invest in anything, it should be the health and safety of the American people, and we can create good job and good career opportunities for people along the way. So it's really a win-win. So the only thing that I worry about is that not enough people know how much is coming into states and cities across the country as a result of this. And we've really only seen the tip of the iceberg. The money is still being allocated and divvied up. So in the construction field, we're looking at a good 10 years worth of work.
Has there been a investment like that before that's lasted this long?
I mean, the last example would have been Franklin Roosevelt, right? Those kinds of investments, or in the '60s, the Great Society programs to try to address the unemployment and poverty that was affecting our country then. It's really a generational opportunity, and I really think that we all do have a debt to President Joe Biden for his vision of what to do once he became president. The former President Trump talked about infrastructure, monthly for his presidency, and nothing ever happened. There was no new brick laid, no new, square foot of concrete poured. It was promised but not delivered. And President Biden, in a bipartisan way, again, that's super important that there was support on both sides of the aisle, really got the job done. You mentioned Labor Day, and a local iron worker named Rich Kangas introduced Governor Walz, and he's been an iron worker for like 15 years. And he said it was a good feeling as an iron worker to know you had an 18-month good season ahead of you, because you knew you'd be home to tuck your kids in bed, and that you were going to be having, your hours accrue as a construction worker to earn your health benefits, so that to know you had steady work coming up meant you knew your family was being taken care of. And so to go from 18 months of guaranteed work being the standard for a good lifestyle to knowing that we've got a decade's worth of work, that was something that Rich commented on Labor Day that I thought was very, very important and impactful.
It definitely seems like an initiative or a movement that's definitely trickling down to local construction, and the unions benefit a lot greatly from it, as I can see. I want to ask, you've worked in economic development, a little bit of workforce development, policy, a little bit of everything. What are some of the challenges in some of those areas you've faced over your career, and how do you overcome them?
Well, one of the things I really realized when I went from the research center at UW Milwaukee to my job out in the field, in the community, is that a policy or a plan is only as good as its implementation. You can have the best idea, but if it just stays in a book, or if it's implemented badly, that's not going to change anything. And I think I was fortunate to take a community organizing training with the organization called MICA about 20 years ago. And that really kind of lit a little fire for me in terms of how do you take policy ideas and really work to see them implemented in the best way possible. And so that's just been something that I have enjoyed in my career. But it was that opportunity in the Park East Corridor to go from just writing a policy or a plan to working to see it implemented that caused me to change course in my career and get involved in the construction industry. And I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it very much.
I was at a conference last week in Sheboygan, speaking a little bit for DC7, giving a construction forecast, and I'm still a new reporter, and it's very fascinating to see. This is a very involved industry. That people who are part of it are obviously advocates for themselves. Do you find that the construction industry, there's a lot of passion in it from the people, from what I can tell on the union side. Do you feel the same way? Was organized labor something you have been interested in from the start? Even before you got into college, for example, or is it something you kind of found along the way?
Yeah, I have a very different story than a lot of people. A lot of people that I meet in Wisconsin who are part of organized labor, even when we talk to like elected officials, my uncle's a carpenter. My dad worked at Briggs and Stratton. We there's a big union legacy. That's when people say Milwaukee is a union town, they're a little more speaking of the legacy. I also think they're speaking of the potential going forward. But obviously, our numbers have taken a hit in the last couple decades. But I didn't know anything. I didn't know anybody in a union or if I did, I didn't know them as a union member when I was growing up. I learned about the value of unions in graduate school and then working alongside so many different building trades representatives on the Park East project, you know, representatives from the 18 different trades, plus the great leadership at the Milwaukee Building and Construction Trades Council. That is what awakened it to me to the potential. And I've had the pleasure of knowing so many people who are either active currently in their field or retired like I am, tell me that, changed their life. I'll never forget a plumber telling me, I just went to Boys Tech. I didn't have any idea what my future was going to be. Luckily, I learned some skills and got connected with the plumbers union and, built a great lifestyle for him and his family. His son's now a plumber. And, it's stories like that I've met people and really saw. I mean, so many people can say the union saved my life or the union changed my life. And that getting to know folks along the way and having those real heart-to-heart conversations has ignited a passion for me. So I became a true believer along the way, definitely learning as I went.
That's great. Yeah, and like you said, I think I've met a lot of people who will mention like, oh, they've had like a parent or a family member of the trades that introduced them. But sometimes you just fall into these things. I didn't expect to be reporting on construction when I was in journalism school, for example. Don't regret it, but I'm here. Tell me a little more about. I know we sort of mentioned the numbers of union construction has taken a hit lately. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but I think Union Stats has something out about Wisconsin construction. I think maybe 1 in every 3 or 4 workers is a union member. What are some of the challenges to building up, workforce on the organized side? If you could look into your crystal ball, if you could, because I know there are like a lot of recruitment efforts. We're obviously very short of workers in the construction industry. I think we had slower growth this year than the last, and what needs to happen now to add on to those numbers and then meet the demands that are coming in, just from federal spending on, these large infrastructure and energy projects and private projects like the Microsoft campus out in Racine. I know it's a big question, but I just want to hear your thoughts in that context.
Sure. No, it's something that a lot of people are obviously spending a lot of time thinking, and there's just a workforce, I think, consortium to designation by the federal government that's, I might not have the terminology just exactly correct there, but Labor Secretary Julie Sue was in Milwaukee recently meeting with folks on workforce issues, and they're working with each different trade union to do a plan to up their apprenticeship numbers. And that's on top of 2 record-breaking years in Wisconsin, 2 in a row for the number of registered apprenticeship participants. So it's building on some good infrastructure that we already have, but it's also seeking to create new outreach pathways. We're past the time where you need to know someone to get into the construction fields. I know a lot of people who just were referred by WRTP Big Step or from Employ Milwaukee. There's a great woman in my local union, Local 113, who came to the hall, took her aptitude test, got her letter that said you could become an apprentice when and if there's a company that wants to take you on as an apprentice. And she took her letter and she just went around to some big general contractors and was a apprentice on for Findorf on the Northwestern Mutual project. And I remember meeting her at an event celebrating the apprentices on that project. And what was great was then when that project ended, Fiserv Forum was starting. So a lot of people were able to not have very much time on the unemployment bench and get right back to work and keep their career moving forward. Similarly, for infrastructure projects, I know members of unions that started their apprenticeship on the Zoo interchange, and because of the length of time that project took, were able to get enough hours in to complete their apprenticeship. And that's what's great about big investments in the Milwaukee area, is that those folks can ride buses to get to work. I mean, construction's a very vehicle dependent, driver's license dependent career. But when we have these big projects like that, it does give people the opportunity. If you were ever downtown at quitting time when the Northwestern project was going on, you'd see a lot of people holding hard hats and tool belts waiting to get on a city bus. And I thought that really spoke volumes about the outreach that's being done in the local community to get more people in the workforce.
You mentioned, the amount of access and public transportation in downtown Milwaukee as being sort of a really helpful driver for getting workers to these large projects on time and getting their hours in. Do you see similar success stories outside of Milwaukee, like the Madison area, La Crosse, or even in Northeast Wisconsin, the Fox cities? I assume you get to talk to a lot of the labor councils and organizers out there as well, and I wanted to know what you're hearing from them as well.
Since I retired from the laborers, I don't have as much statewide perspective. The Milwaukee Area Labor Council is just kind of really that 3-county area, but I do think that investments are being made in every corner of the state. That was what was sort of visionary about the Biden-Harris plan for the infrastructure investments. But I do think, I heard a orientation once for new workers and in the construction field. And I did think this was kind of a funny way to summarize the issue. It was on the issue of the importance of a driver's license. They said, well, your auntie might be able to drive you to training for a little while, but at some point you're going to get dispatched to a different city and you're going to need to get there on your own. So, and I always say, even if you didn't need to drive to get to work, what if your foreman tosses you the keys and tells you to move a pickup truck? Is that the point you want to say to them, I don't have a driver's license? So, this is a really big public policy issue. Obviously, city government's very focused on safe driving in Milwaukee. And so for these young kids that are getting in trouble relative to cars right now, we've got to, as a community, we need to have a plan to help them get out of any legal trouble they've gotten into relative to a driver's license, help them take some classes and, remediate that wrong and get people valid driver's licenses. Because unfortunately, for the construction industry, there is still a need to travel. You might be working on the Microsoft project, and then you might be dispatched by your company to Fond du Lac to work on a hotel or something, and you need to be able to move around to really be successful. I know people, even as journeymen with a decade's experience, if they were getting sent out to a new job on a Monday morning, on Sunday, they'd take a drive to see how long it took to get there from their house so that they wouldn't be late Monday morning.
Pam, I want to pivot the conversation a little bit and talk a little bit about the award you won. Was it a couple of weeks ago? It seems like every week it's a month's worth of news and other things that happen. Being a Lifetime Achievement Award winner, what does it mean to you? And do you have advice for other women in the construction industry who, are looking for guidance and want to move up with their careers?
Well, I don't like really being on the spotlight myself, but that was a very special evening, and my union was there in force cheering for me, and that was really very special. For a long time, I was employed by the region, which is centered in Chicago, the Great Lakes region, and to work in Wisconsin. And I spent probably the first 5 years of my career often being the only woman at the building trades conference or at a laborers conference. It's a very male-dominated industry. And I was thrilled when I got to meet Kyla Engelke, now the business manager, one of the few women business managers of a construction union for OPC MIA Local 599. And she had a vision to start a solutions-oriented, positive, if I can say, not a witch session, trying to keep it good for the radio there, where people could get together and talk about how much they like their careers and problem solve together, but focused on women in the field. And that organization has really grown a lot. We've been doing a mentoring pilot. We've been doing a childcare pilot. And that was what was great for me to see at that event was just, I don't know if this was the 5th annual or if it's been going on longer, Daily Reporter event celebrating women in construction, but there's a common saying of you have to see it to know that you can be it. And I think that that is something that we are trying to change in the industry. There's a lot of pink and purple hard hats now that we put out on our job, our career fair tables. I remember being at one in Union Grove and calling out to a young woman, "Have you ever thought about being in construction?" And she walked right past the table and told me emphatically, "Construction isn't for women." But we know people, and now I'm still a member of Labor's Local 113, even though I don't work for the laborers anymore. So I go to the monthly union meetings as often as I can, and I can see there was like 13 women in the union hall the other night, and that's up for it used to be 2 to 3. So that was a great meeting to see so many women participating. But the need for the change is, if you look at the numbers for registered apprenticeship in Wisconsin, we're only 3 to 4%. Women are only 3 to 4% of those cohorts. So there's been progress made on attaching more minority workers to construction and progress made on attaching more women, but there's still a lot of work to be done in diversifying the industry.
One of the things I heard at the District Council 7 conference was I think a lot of the trades are aware that, there's a shortage in the work, of skilled labor in the workforce. And to fill that in, the demographic is going to change. There are going to be a lot of more women, and I think primarily Spanish-speaking people moving into these roles to meet the demands for construction. Do you agree with that sentiment as well?
Well, I think we need to reach into all community underserved or non-traditional, as they say, communities for it. Construction has been dominated by white male workers from coast to coast. So it's just a demographic issue we have to face. The chief economist for the State Department of Workforce Development has been telling us for years the baby boom generation is going to retire. And I'm in the tail end of the baby boom generation, and I did take early retirement. So it's true, we are leaving the workforce, and the next generation is smaller. So you had said earlier there's a worker shortage for construction, but it's actually across industry. So it's not just like union construction competing against non-union construction. We're competing against manufacturing and the IT sector. We're everybody's trying to attract that same new high school graduate into their pathway, right? So the thing that is good about construction that we offer is high wages, good, excellent benefits, really great healthcare, and good retirement security. So those things are really to our advantage. Of course, the downside is we can't solve every group's unemployment issues because not everyone's cut out for construction. I myself have a fear of heights. I wouldn't have been a good iron worker or a roofer. So it's lucky I was in a policy shop for construction, not actually out in the field. But there are great opportunities, and our apprenticeship programs really train people to a high quality standard. And I think that's the other thing that we have to offer that maybe the non-union sector doesn't, is real clear steps to going from a new person on the job to an experienced journey level worker.
Before we sign off here, was there anything you would like to, as I could say, plug or mention that we didn't get a chance to talk about?
Sure. Well, one thing that I'd like to mention is that I said earlier that, Milwaukee has this reputation as a union town, and the council's actually working on a little report that looks back to when that was strongest for Milwaukee, and then what are the policy levers or things that need to be done to kind of rebuild that wealth in the community. When you think about areas like the 30th Street Industrial Corridor that's being redeveloped, that was such a vibrant area when there was manufacturing widely available to folks, right out of college, get a great job, and be able to walk to work from your home. Now the housing stock in that area is not in as good a shape. There's many more renters than owners, and that's a direct key from economic decisions that were made, in the era of deindustrialization. So as we've got these investments, our Senator Tammy Baldwin's such an excellent voice for make it in the USA, make it in Wisconsin. We're going to see some manufacturing revival here along with the construction trajectory. So what can we do to sort of put Milwaukee back on the map as a union town? So we'll be having some information to share later this fall on that.
I'll certainly keep an ear out for that. That sounds very interesting. I think we can wrap it up there. I want to say thanks for being on the show and congratulations again on our award, and looking forward to the next time we chat.
Thanks very much, Ethan. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.